Hi everyone, I'm going to be speaking to you today about the summer solstice, which is happening on the 21st of June. It's happening at 3 a.m. in the UK, but you have to adjust for your own time zone. So in some parts of America, it's going to be, in fact, most of America, it's going to be happening on the 20th. So that's what I'm going to be focused on. But firstly, I'd just like to welcome any new viewers to the channel. Have a wide variety of content here, and I hope you really enjoy all that we share. So let's talk about the summer solstice. Now, I think you are all aware of the very high level of solar activity that we have right now. The sun is incredibly active, and I'm filming this on the 3rd of June. And we are still at the sort of tail end of what has been a very, very strong G4 geomagnetic storm. And the KP index, which is an index of geomagnetic activity, has been up to 8. And it only goes up to 9. That's the maximum. And so this can test power grids, it can test radio signals, GPS, etc. But it also obviously affects our own physicality. But these solar flares, these very high frequency light codes that are part of this new level of geomagnetic activity, geocosmic activity, are very much ingredients for our evolution. So really try and welcome them in, even if it's uncomfortable. If you've got odd aches and pains and tinnitus and dizziness and weird sleep patterns. On Sunday night I slept for 11 hours, last night I slept for an hour and a half. It's sort of all over the place, but always, rather than resisting, saying I'm welcoming in these ingredients for my evolution, because that's actually what they are, and it will give us a smoother ride. So I'm going to be talking about just this summer solstice, but remember that, in fact, correction, Cancer solstice, because of course it's only a summer solstice in the northern hemisphere, it's a winter solstice in the southern hemisphere, so it's the Cancer solstice. This is where the sun in the tropical western zodiac crosses zero of Cancer. And remember that the tropical western zodiac is anchored into the seasons very firmly. And this is a very interesting one, actually. I think it's a very powerful solstice, because with solstices and equinoxes, it's like striking a gong or a tuning fork for the next 3 months. It acts as a backdrop of astrological energy for the next 3 months, and on top of that we layer all the other transits and lunations as we go through. But this is strong for reasons I'm going to describe, and we've been through and continue to go through in every moment a whole series of choice points in a bigger way probably than we've ever done in our lifetimes, because the choices we're making now are so incredibly important in terms of the timeline we are choosing. But also this is a change point, I feel, a change point, because we had a very strong change point, and many of you felt it, and I certainly felt it, around the Aries equinox. It was really covering the second half of March and early April, and it's something that Nancy Rebecca highlighted in her work, and also Kelly Kolodny with channeling Archangel Raphael highlighted in her work. I think because that was massive for me, and I know it was for many of you. So that was the kind of start point, I think, for a jump in this new episode for humanity. And now we have our new stepping stone, our new milestone with this Cancer solstice. It has a greater sense of destiny about it, this solstice. And that isn't something I often talk about in astrology. Rather, I go the other way, because I so often say that astrology is only half the picture, and the other half is we as co-creators are weaving that energy into manifestation, which we absolutely are. But there's certain aspects of astrology which I think are more destined or fated. The nodal axis, I think, has that quality. The eclipses, and of course the eclipses, the lunations have to happen close to the nodal axis to form eclipses. But also I think what we're going to be looking at are fingers of fate, fingers of God, in this particular chart for the Cancer solstice. remember that ancient peoples have celebrated, have had celebrations around these equinoxes and solstices for hundreds and thousands of years. Somehow they knew that the veil was thinner, and that literally meant the magnetic field, the magnetosphere around the Earth was thinner at these times, and so that they could access high-level information more easily. How did they know that? Well, I think they were way more sophisticated than we in our modern times are, but we are going to start to remember those kinds of abilities and gifts. So let us look at the chart for this Cancer solstice. So, as I say, this is happening UK time, 3 o'clock in the morning. That's, by the way, universal time. On the clock, it would be 4 o'clock in the morning because we are still very much on British summertime. But it's the 21st of June. And so, unless you're in that geography of England, UK, ignore the clock face, ignore the houses. Just look at where the planets are falling in the signs and their aspects to each other. And this is strong. So the Cancer solstice is defined by when the sun enters 0 of Cancer, which we can see here. And beautifully, it is conjunct Jupiter, the planet of expansion. And Jupiter is exalted in the sign of Cancer. I've done a whole video on Jupiter and Cancer. I'll put the link for that below so I don't have to cover that same ground. But it is a very happy place for Cancer for Jupiter to be. Very much about self-care, spending time with loved ones, family and other loved ones, and a real sense of nurturing. But it brings with it this great sense of expansion. And this is absolutely what we are into now. And Jupiter also brings with us a sense of understanding the interconnectedness of all things. And it brings in a sense of long-distance travel. There's an interesting quincunx to Pluto, which I'll come back to in a minute. But this is really suggesting a much stronger galactic connection too, because Jupiter is about distant space, and Aquarius is very connected to the galactic beings, the foreigners, the outsiders, but actually they are our family, as we are going to, I think, increasingly discover. So, and this is also connected to our wisdom as well, our higher consciousness. So there's a sense of expanding our higher consciousness from this point on, particularly over the next 3 months. And I think that is absolutely spot on for the other energies. Sun and Jupiter are square to the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, which all astrologers are talking about right now. I'll put the video I did for that below, so again, I won't have to cover that again. But this is really, I think, ultimately about our spiritual sovereignty, becoming your own spiritual leader, your own spiritual hero as well. And so in this sense of expanding consciousness, that sense of sovereignty plays a huge part. And that's going to grow stronger and stronger from this point on. And I think what we're really looking at, it's so exciting, is a sense of expanding cosmic consciousness and galactic consciousness. And remember the mantra that I encourage us to use in our daily or nightly meditation, those free 15-minute meditations. I'll put the details of those below. We're welcoming in an expanded consciousness of love. We're welcoming in an expanded consciousness of love. Well, this is the expanded consciousness, Sun, Jupiter, and they are actually semi-square to Venus. Love. Venus in its own sign of Taurus. Beautiful. So that mantra of we're welcoming in an expanded consciousness of love will serve you very well, if you can't think of anything better, to celebrate in these times we are going through. And there's a sense of spiritual idealism at this time. Yes, Saturn, Neptune, but also a groundedness. Saturn is really helping us here, because without that, Jupiter, Neptune can be a little bit big bubble, over idealistic, no limits. Saturn grounds it. What's practical? What's realistic? What's pragmatic? How can we plan for the long term? So it's actually incredibly helpful. Now, what is very interesting as well here is we have 4 planets, Saturn, Neptune, Sun, Jupiter, on the Aries point or the world axis. Those terms are interchangeable. The Aries point isn't just 0 of Aries, it actually applies to 0 of Cancer, 0 of Libra, 0 of Capricorn. And those are also the points of what is known as the world axis, where qualities or events are thrown into public prominence potentially, and use a tight 2-degree orb either side of that. So it's really 28 degrees of the mutable signs. Those are Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, Pisces, up to 2 degrees of the cardinal signs, Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn. If you have any planets or angles there in your personal chart, they have the potential for greater public exposure, to be on the public stage in a bigger way. As I've often said, that's where my Mercury is, so I speak and write publicly. So it's very simple in that way. So not only that, and this is for astrologers really, I don't know how many astrologers are aware that 15 degrees of the fixed signs is also another world point. And that is because 15 degrees of the fixed signs is semi-square to 0 of the cardinals. And those hard angles activate whatever it's touching. So 15 degrees of the fixed signs, so Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius, again, tight 2-degree orb by the side, are also on a world point. So that means that here we have 4 planets on the Aries point, the world axis, and we also have Venus in its own sign of Taurus, also on a world point. That speaks of potency for this Cancer solstice. And you're not going to get, I've been looking down the timeline to the Libra equinox and the Capricorn solstice and the Aries equinox next year. We are not going to have that number of planets on the world axis because Jupiter moves on quite quickly. And he spends a year in Cancer. That moves on quite quickly. Saturn moves on April, May. It's moving away from that world axis. So it is only this Cancer solstice where we have those 4 planets, and we can also include Venus in Taurus there, a 5th one on the world point, the world axis. That says this is important and this is potent. If we just look at the number of planets, sorry, before I leave there, those qualities are also likely to be more visible on the world stage. So what do I mean by that? Saturn is linked to our integrity and our morality. So when it is on that highly public point, you or anyone in the public eye, particularly if they have not behaved with integrity and a good moral compass, that's going to be made visible. Neptune, if anyone has behaved deceptively, that's going to be made public. Jupiter, it will be made public if you've been very generous or very wise or kind, but it will also be made public if you have over-exaggerated something or been excessive, gone over the top with something, and in some kind of abusive way. So just observe this, because I think that's going to be very interesting indeed in terms of how that manifests. If we just look at the number of planets, and I'm going to include 2 dwarf planets here that are between 0 and 2 degrees of their sign, I think we have 8. Again, these are very potent degrees, the first 2 degrees of any sign. It doesn't just have to be a cardinal sign. So we have Saturn, Neptune, 2. We have the Moon, exalted in Taurus, by the way, that's 3. Sedna, dwarf planet, 1 degree of Gemini, 4. Sun, Jupiter, 5, 6, Mars, 2 degrees of Virgo, 7, Homer at 1 degree of Scorpio, 8. We have 8 planets, including 2 dwarf planets, between 0 and 2 degrees of their signs. These are strong, strong degrees in any sign. Again, another sign of potency. What we also have here, and remember I'm referring to these next 3 months, not just the 21st of June. We have, and I've highlighted them in green, we have 3 what are called yods, or fingers of fate, fingers of God. Now, if you have these in your own birth chart, and again, you can only use a 2-degree or, by the way, so very tight aspects, and this is where you have a sextile of 2 or more planets at the base. So let's look at this one here. We have the Sun, Jupiter, sextile to Mars. So that's the base. And then we have a planet at the pointy end of this skinny triangle, and that's Pluto. So if you have something like that in your own birth chart, the planet at the point, the point of the skinny triangle, is what is highlighted for you as a destined focal point to work with in your life. And the base planets are the energies that you have to integrate as you move through that soul journey. So, for instance here, this is about incorporating wisdom, and also Mars is in Virgo. Virgo I very much here see as the ancient wisdom keepers, the people in deep, deep shamanic connection to the earth. I feel Virgo is often very connected to shamanism. It's plant medicine, herb medicine, essential oils, the earth providing any medicine to heal us. So this is really connecting back to some ancient wisdom that we may have forgotten, that connects in with our self-care and connects in with this sense of a family of frequency. This is going to be operating more and more in community. And they are feeding into this sense of transformation, higher mind, Aquarius, and galactic consciousness. That's potent. That's a potent mix. And I really feel those in my bones, that's kind of a big area of theme in terms of where we are headed. Another one we have here is we have Pluto sextile to this Neptune-Saturn point, feeding into Mars. So again, we have the planet of transformation and spiritual sovereignty, feeding into a real remembrance of that ancient wisdom. It's a similar message coming through. And we also have a third one. We have Saturn-Neptune, sextile to Uranus at the very end of Taurus. I'll talk about that in a moment. And Sedna, feeding into Homer. Homer is incredibly heavily aspected here at this chart. I mean, look at the number of aspects feeding into Homer. We'll come to that in a moment as well. So this again is about your own sense of spiritual sovereignty, your leadership, being a spiritual hero, being a pioneer, going your own way. And this is, this is an incredibly strong conjunction that I'll talk more about probably in the next video, because Uranus is on the brink. Well, it's already operationally conjunct to Sedna, but it's on the brink of breaking through to that conjunction in Gemini. And I could spend hours just talking about this. But this is a sense of, again, connecting to the galactic beings, Uranus. Uranus being at the very last degree of Taurus, I think, is very connected to some major radical sudden events, either in financial markets or in the earth. This could be very seismic as well. But it's also the planet that is about to ignite this planet of metamorphosis, Sedna. ignite to a whole, jumpstart us. There's a quantum jump into humanity's metamorphosis. And I'm going really, really goosebumpy now. I've done a whole video on metamorphosis for humanity a year or so ago. I'll put that below. But this is so beautiful because Uranus is the planet of awakening. It's the planet of discovery. It's the planet of truth. So we are going to be making so many discoveries, not only about the deep oceans and the deep seas. This is where Sedna, Inuit goddess of the Arctic, resides, deep, deep down. We know so little about our seas and oceans. So much will be discovered about those. But also Sedna, remember, in her 11,400-year orbit, goes all the way out to the edge of the Oort cloud, way out in space. Pretty much the furthest out dwarf planet we know, and brings back information from that very far point in our galaxy. So we, as I have said before, we are going to be discovering so much more about the way out there, our galactic family, how we create our reality, the cosmos, the reality of the cosmos, and the deep seas. And somehow that's going to be a mirror image as well. So much more to come with that. And they are feeding into Haumea. Remember, both Sedna and Haumea are dwarf planets of regeneration. Sedna, her fingers transformed into beautiful sea creatures of high frequency turtles, whales, dolphins. Haumea regenerated herself from an old crone to a young maiden, birthed babies from all over her body. But remember the other aspects of the mythology of Haumea. In her other aspects, one aspect was, she said in her fire goddess expression, to have birthed the 8 islands of Hawaii, because she's regenerative, this eruptive quality, which Uranus shares too, of this new birth of new land. And I strongly believe that with these major earth shifts we are going to see as we move through the months and years, this is going to bring up land perhaps from ancient Lemuria and ancient Atlantis. We are going to see new land coming up linked to that myth of Haumea about birthing the 8 islands of Hawaii, which is also said to be one of the sites of ancient Lemuria. The other aspect of the myth of Haumea is community. You may be aware that in the myth that her partner, who had stolen some wild bananas from the land, he was going to be put to death by the autocratic ruler. And the autocratic ruler had an army with weapons, but somehow Haumea managed to summon spiritual help and the help of the community to come together. And somehow in that spiritual help and community collaboration, she overcame the autocratic ruler with his weapons and his threats. I think that has great importance for us in these times. Haumea is super highlighted and activated at this Cancer solstice. So all of the aspects of her mythology are being activated now with wisdom, with awakening, with quantum leaps, with our spiritual sovereignty, of seeing new spiritual perspectives that we just didn't see before. We are moving so quickly into our multidimensionality now. And I know people are feeling that to different degrees. And don't worry if you're not feeling that yet. Everyone is on their own journey. Everyone has different gifts. But I absolutely know, because it's happening to many people I know, that people are having a stronger sense of telepathy. Their healing gifts are getting much stronger. They're beginning to see elemental beings and orbs, fairies and nymphs and elves, etc. They're beginning to see and get in contact with galactic beings. Their dreams are becoming more active. All of these things happening. And that is the direction of travel. If you are on any kind of a higher timeline connected to love and not in fear. If you're in fear, and remember, nobody pushes you onto any timeline, you self-select by your frequency. That is so important for you to know. This is just going to blossom into a kind of experience that we have never known before. And it's very hard to get vocabulary for this because there's been no rehearsal. We've never done it before. So, these are super strong times. I also think that because we have this, I don't know if you can see this black line here with a little Q, this is a quindecile, or it's spelt quindecile, 165-degree aspect, again, tight orb, 2 degrees either side. This is, although Venus in Taurus, and this is true of Moon in Taurus too, they want to keep things as they are. It's very steady, it's very stabilizing, it don't rock the boat. However, this quincunx to Homer, which is about eruption of new lands or ancient lands, the aspect of the quindecile is very much about upheaval or upset. So I think, and particularly because Uranus is at the crisis, the anoretic degree of Taurus, fixed Earth, we are likely to see some, such as we've seen very recently, a lot of earthquake activity, volcanic activity, that kind of thing. All of this is Gaia going through her upgrade. She is going through her rebirth, and go along with her in that. Don't resist and think everything's gone wrong. She's in charge. Gaia is in charge, and just flow as you are best able with that. But also, I think this configuration is about really, really rediscovering our love for the Earth. I mean, Moon, Venus in Taurus, it's beautiful. Our love for the Earth. And Homer also has deep shamanic connection to the Earth as well, instinctive understanding of the Earth. Really beautiful. And so all of those aspects, I think, will be part of the next 3 months from this Cancer solstice. I do think with Moon and Venus here, there will be issues around food production, natural resources, that kind of thing. But let's increasingly see ourselves as part of nature and not disconnected from nature as we've been in our modern life. I also feel that any victim woundedness of the past is going to be spoken about more publicly at this time and over the next 3 months. There's a lot of truth. That's not only Uranus at this crisis anoretic degree, but it's also the Sun, Jupiter. Truth, honesty, the law even. So we will see what unfolds at this time. But this sense of acknowledging the woundedness and having that sense of injustice, but feisty errors saying, we're not going to do this again. We are going to move forwards on a much more loving and equal footing where everyone's voice is heard. Everyone is acknowledged. So, there's a lot in this Cancer solstice. And June, I think, particularly from the 15th onwards, we've got very strong aspects on the 15th, as I will have talked about, and I will talk about again in the next update too, that that's a peak point of power as well, but more of that in other videos. And so I'll stop sharing here and really do recognize that this evolution we're going through, it has never happened like this before. We are taking this through our physicality. We're taking it through our breath. We're taking it through every cell in our body. So try and get this feeling of, I am a co-creator with these changes. I am supporting the Earth. I'm loving the Earth in a way that I haven't perhaps done before in this lifetime. As I move through the ancient woodland and my morning walks, I send love to the trees. Gosh, you are so beautiful. You're so graceful. You're so magnificent. And I'm doing that in a bigger way than I've ever done before. I've always loved the trees, but I'm doing it in a bigger way. And I think with all that's happening in the world, just occasionally, if I'm down at my local garage and I just catch some of the news and I hear about the wars and the money spent on the wars. Now, I'm just thinking that is so distant to me as a timeline. And that doesn't mean I don't care, because I care deeply about the people who are suffering. And that's part of what we're doing in the free 15-minute meditations every day or every evening, depending on your time zone. I'll put the link for that below. As I said before, that is the most useful thing we can do, scattered all over the world. We can send love and peace and calming energy to those terrible, terrible situations of suffering. But how can we still be at war? How are we still killing each other? I mean, it just is so far away on a different timeline. And the more we can move to the timeline of love and joy and bliss and gratitude and all the things we talk about, the less war will be part of our reality. It will just go to black and white and then just fade away, which is actually exactly what's happening. But I think it is a very, very dynamic, event-packed, as I said way back in January, chaotic at times year. And recognize that the chaos and the breakdown of the old has to be part of the picture. We have to see it, partly to say we're not doing that again, but partly to know that old energy is now gone. The most powerful thing you can do, I feel, is keep it simple. Drop into stillness. Close your eyes. Watch your breath. Fall in love with the breath. Imagine that your breath is not only being breathed in and out of your heart with love, but you are breathing love into every single cell of your body. And make that the place you operate from. So if you can do that fairly regularly, ideally, even just for a few minutes, several times a day, you get this much greater sense of I'm operating from the inside out, something I've talked about so many times. I'm not operating from the outside in, where I leak energy to the external authorities, the new, whoever. And also, when you're in that sense of complete stillness, bliss, no time, no space, you are not leaking energy to the past or the future. That's where your power lies. And I think we all know that we are moving beyond linear time. I think we all have a sense of that one way or another. There are time glitches and time's racing, and then we're driving along a road, we've already driven, it's kind of deja vu. Linear time as we've known it, the 3D, they are dissolving. So the more that now you can get into that sense of stillness, bliss, no time, no space, I'm connected to nature, I'm connected to all living beings, that sense of complete, well, I call it bliss, of simple bliss, ultimately, the more you practice, becomes a kind of radiant presence. People notice when you walk into a room, you're just shining, because you've charged your lighthouse, if you like. You've charged your energy internally to such a degree that your light is beaming out very strongly. And remember, that's infectious. Light carries information, but we infect other people with our light, even complete strangers, 8-10 feet away, further, 50 feet away. We infect them with our light. And so you become like a jump leads for light. And that is also one of the most powerful things we can do in these times, in your local shop, your local store, your local garage. How many people can you infect with your light and your radiant presence today? And that feels quite emotional. God bless. Bye for now. Be back very soon indeed with another very different video. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being with me. Bye for now.